Here is my interview with Professor Liu Jinzhao from the Beijing Foreign Studies University. She has been doing research and teaching on this subject for years and is an expert in this field. I asked her what makes Nordic countries so much more open towards same-sex marriage than other countries. We also talked about what attitudes people in Asia, particularly in China, have towards LGBT community and how far China is moving towards legalizing same-sex marriage, if that is the direction China is pursuing at all.
There are several reasons why the Nordic countries are leading the rest of the world in the legalization of same-sex marriage. A prominent reason will be the secularization of these countries, but another important reason is the ability of the central government to manage social resources, to guarantee basic civil rights, and to include marriage and sexuality in their social welfare. As we know, Nordic countries are very well developed in their welfare programs. If you don't have enough social resources to even take care of the majority of the population, you may not be able to take care of sexual minorities of your society.
These countries, of course, they are more developed, they are quite open in their attitude towards LGBT minorities. However, there are this detail which I noticed. For instance, even in this new law, same-sex couples are only allowed to be wed in civil ceremonies, but those who want to go to church and have their religious ceremony will still be kept on the waiting list. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. Thank you for asking. Well, it varies from country to country whether the civic marriage is recognized by the religious marriage. In some countries, you need to be recognized by both in order to be officially considered a couple or having a spousal relationship. In other countries, religious ceremony will suffice for you to get social acceptance. But in other countries, civic marriage, civic union is more important. So it really varies from country to country.
But does that still say the kind of religious resistance or opposition to the idea of same-sex marriage, and even in these countries?
It's hard to say. Even in these over 20 countries that have legalized same-sex marriage, there are still resistance groups and organized resistance movement against legalization. But on the whole, if the organized religions or organized churches of mostly these Christian countries and predominantly Protestant countries, if they are more willing to accept alternative marriage and alternative lifestyle, alternative sexual practices, then these countries are more likely to pass the law for same-sex marriage.
Let's talk about the region of Asia and Africa. As I mentioned earlier, not one single country or region in Asia has legalized same-sex marriage. Why is there so much difficulty or opposition toward this notion in these part of the world?
Well, only South Africa has legalized same-sex marriage in Africa, and no country in Asia, as you mentioned. I think, first of all, it has a lot to do with people's, or the majority people's, definition of family and marriage. Primarily, the function of family is to pass on family lines, to have ongoing generations.
To people the world.
Yeah, to cherish their ancestors. And sexuality is still considered the primary function of procreation, meaning to have offsprings. It's not primarily for pleasure. It has economic and social obligations. So in Asia, I think a lot of countries still define marriage based on genealogy, based on a union between a man and a woman. So I think public opinion has formed the consensus against the legalization of same-sex marriage. Another reason is that most Asian countries and African countries are not very well developed in their economic and social resources. And most of the governments cannot guarantee even the social welfare for the majority of the society. I don't think their welfare programs are as advanced and penetrating as Nordic countries.
So from what you just said, it seems as if when a society becomes more developed economically, it is the trend that people will accept more and more same-sex marriage. But is that really the case? I mean, do we all one day have to live with the reality that same-sex marriage will be legalized? Is that the direction in your eyes? I'm sure there might be a lot of people who would never agree with that.
Right. People would disagree. I think the result will primarily be a combination between public opinion and the capacity of the government to manage social resources. Even if a country is economically highly developed, if the majority of the people think marriage should be still limited to a union between a man and a woman, or if they think marriage is primarily for having children from their bloodline, or biologically related children, then there will still be resistance against legalization of same-sex marriage.
Taiwan is a possible exception in Asia. As we know, last year the Taiwan Authority passed an amendment to include same-sex marriage in its civil code. However, over 1 million people came out on the street to protest against that. Why is Taiwan different from other regions, other countries in Asia, and why such public outpour of opposition again?
Well, Taiwan has a long tradition of somehow a relatively open attitudes towards alternative lifestyles and towards sexual, gender, and ethnic minorities.
But it still has these over 1 million people who came out to say no to it.
Exactly. So we can see this clash between new attitudes, new emphasis on the meaning of marriage, the definition of family, and the emphasis on the quality of family and marriage based on genuine love. And on the other hand, there is this strong tradition in Asia that emphasizes the function and the importance of family.
Let's come to mainland China. How, as I said, only 5% of people come out of the closet and admit that they are gay or lesbian or other sexual minorities. How far away are we from same-sex marriage, like the situation in Scandinavia? Are we going in that direction at all?
Recently, there has been a surge or coming into being of concerns and even a kind of social movement of LGBT for LGBT interests in China. But there is a still long way to go because the development in China is still very uneven. The leading cities are very, very different from the rest of the country. On the other hand, if we have a conservative estimation of the percentage of population that have alternative sexual orientations, say 3% to 5%, then we have to admit that there might be 40 million to 70 million people.
That's a lot of people still.
That's a lot of people. If we go by 5% of the population, which is a conservative guess, it will be 70 million, which is more than the population of entire Thailand.
Wow.
Far more than the total population of Britain and France. So it's a very challenging issue. There is a large size of social group in China.
Yeah, in case there is steps towards legalization or the consideration of legalization of same-sex marriage in China, how would that possibly change our social structure and our social life?
Well, if in the future, say a decade from now or 2 decades from now, homosexual marriage will be legalized. First of all, it will change the definition of family. It will change the definition of marriage. And all the social welfare, for instance, the rights to make medical decisions for your spouse, the rights to inherit from your spouse investment or real estate holdings will all change in the society. So that means the government should have more say in every individual's lifestyle. So it will change the social structure in terms of the definition and the purpose of marriage and the family, and also it will change part of our welfare programs.
So although it's a distant scenario, we should still start thinking about it. What if one day it really comes? We should be prepared for that.
Yeah, we should definitely keep this issue on the agenda of discussion.